All right, let's get right into this explainer. Today, we're doing something incredibly fascinating. We are going to decode a wildly complex anxiety dream to figure out exactly how our subconscious processes real-world stress. We're unpacking a case study that, honestly, sounds completely absurd at first, but we are going to translate these chaotic dream events into a profound psychological journey.
I mean, we've all had those bizarre, stressful dreams, right? You know the ones you wake up with your heart absolutely racing because you couldn't find your classroom, or maybe you were suddenly taking a test you literally never studied for. Well, those dreams aren't just random neurological static. They're actually incredibly sophisticated messages from our minds. So today we're going to look at one specific, multi-layered nightmare and break down exactly what the dreamer's brain was desperately trying to tell them.
Section 1. Liminal Space, Airport and Trinity. So, our dream kicks off in an airport, where the dreamer is heading to a fourth-floor LCC language school. But the weird part? The students are all foreigners, and they're inexplicably there to learn Japanese.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the airport acts as a psychological transit zone. In depth psychology, an airport perfectly visualizes a liminal space. It's a threshold. The dreamer isn't at their origin, but they definitely haven't reached their destination either. They're basically craving a pause, a psychological moratorium, if you will, before having to make a major life decision. They're just suspended in transit.
But wait, why an LCC or low-cost carrier school? Well, it's because the dreamer is looking for a shortcut. They want this cheap, fast path to personal growth without paying the heavy emotional toll that, let's be real, always comes with actual transformation. Plus, you've got this totally bizarre image of foreigners learning the dreamer's native language, Japanese. This perfectly represents the unconscious foreign parts of the psyche desperately trying to adapt to the conscious mind's everyday rules.
Then, early in the dream, the dreamer spots a childhood friend from Norway. But suddenly, the receptionist recognizes this friend as Carrie-Anne Moss. Yeah, Trinity from The Matrix. And this isn't just a random pop culture cameo. It actually signifies the anima, the inner spiritual guide in Jungian psychology, stepping in. Just like Trinity pulled Neo out of the Matrix, this integrated anima is acting as a powerful guide to pull the dreamer out of their current mental rut and push them toward a higher state of consciousness.
While waiting for the next step, the dreamer sinks deeply into this highly artistic, wavy, white sofa. I mean, it's so deep they're practically lying down. This deep, womb-like sofa visually represents a temporary psychological regression. They're faced with the sudden, terrifying announcement of an upcoming test, and so the dreamer is showing this desperate, unconscious need for maternal protection and safety right before they have to face reality.
Section 2. Regression, Classmates and Infinite Q. Moving into the next room of the dream, we see how this environment builds into an intense psychological regression. The test is starting, and everything just radically shifts.
Suddenly, the sophisticated foreign students completely vanish, and in their place, the dreamer's actual junior high school classmates. Faced with the pressure of a major social test, the mind just regresses straight back to early adolescence. And honestly, it makes perfect sense. Junior high is pretty much the peak era of social insecurity, identity formation, and massive imposter syndrome. To make matters even worse, a chaotic, ant-like queue forms in the shape of a figure 8 just to sign in for this test.
Realizing they don't have a pen to sign in, the dreamer desperately asks an old, quiet classmate for one, only to be hit with a genuinely chilling rejection. "Can you not touch me?"
Ouch, right? But it turns out this rejection isn't random at all. This quiet classmate represents the dreamer's shadow. The dreamer actually admitted to having a history of bad behavior back in middle school, so this rejection is literally their own repressed guilt punishing them. To cope with this, the dreamer quickly pivots to a friendly clubmate to borrow a pen instead. It's a classic defense mechanism, seeking out a safe, low-stakes resource just to avoid the harsh judgment of your own superego.
But almost instantly, the dreamer loses that borrowed pen in a total mess of papers. Now they're stuck outside this figure 8 line, with finished past memos on the left and future unwritten ones on the right. Losing the pen and getting stuck in this infinite loop perfectly symbolizes the dreamer's deep-seated fear of losing their social agency. They feel completely paralyzed, entirely unable to pass this initiation into adult responsibility.
Which brings us to Section 3, Anxiety, Fixation on Details. As the anxiety hits its absolute peak, the subconscious decides to just crank up the heat, throwing physical barriers and deeply confusing puzzles right into the mix.
The friendly classmate hands over 3 memo pads with dates, July 7th, September 7th, and October 2nd. But they aren't normal pieces of paper. The dates are covered in this thick 3D nylon, almost like an impenetrable plastic shell. Now, in numerology, 7 represents spirituality, 9 is the completion of a cycle, and 10 is social order. So this thick nylon visually maps out exactly how the dreamer currently views time and impending deadlines, not as opportunities, but as literal physical walls they just can't see past.
And this perfectly illustrates why the dream suddenly shifts into an absolutely impossible, nonsensical test. Instead of dealing with the massive stress of an actual life transition, the dreamer's mind uses a defense mechanism known as displacement.
So the test literally becomes about counting snack bags and trying to read microscopic, cut-off text hidden under a wrapper flap. Seriously, the dreamer and their classmates start agonizingly debating whether the phrase caramel popcorn mori is a palindrome meant to be read forwards and backwards. By obsessing over this incredibly trivial, unsolvable little detail, the dreamer is actively burning mental energy just to avoid facing their actual, real-world burnout and life decisions.
Section 4. Conflict. Broken defenses. Let's dive right into the climax of the dream, where all this internal psychological conflict physically manifests as a literal battle.
The scene abruptly shifts. Now, the dreamer and their middle school classmates are hiding in the dark backstage of a theater. Out in the bright spotlight, though, the foreign students are having this incredibly vibrant, energetic rap battle and dance-off. This is such a brilliant contrast. You have the closed-off, exhausted, conscious mind hiding in the dark, getting entirely overpowered by the raw, uninhibited energy of the unconscious mind out in the light.
Trying to save the day, the dreamer grabs a microphone to address the crowd, declaring they're going to turn things around. They pick up these broken pieces of wavy plastic, red, white, blue, beige, desperately trying to fit their fingers into the grooves to somehow use them as weapons or tools. This heroic yet utterly meaningless attempt is the ego's last desperate try at somatic grounding. Basically, they're trying to use physical touch to anchor themselves to reality before a total psychological collapse.
But the plastic is broken, the battle is lost, and totally defeated, the dreamer forcefully squishes themselves tightly into the thick white stage curtains alongside the rest of their hiding classmates. Hiding in these curtains signifies the absolute breakdown of the ego's defenses. It is a full-blown retreat from societal pressure. Finally, Section 5, Rebirth. Bizarre haircut and catharsis. But wait, just as the dreamer wakes up feeling surprisingly relieved, a final crucial memory from the very beginning of the dream at the airport suddenly surfaces, and it completely flips the meaning of the entire experience. The dreamer remembers visiting an airport barbershop before the test. Now, in depth psychology, hair represents our life force, our drive, and our sense of control. Because of that, getting a haircut is actually the ultimate symbol for a violent yet absolutely necessary psychological reset. Now look closely at the bizarre nature of this haircut. The dreamer's head was shaved completely flat and bald on top, but the sides were styled into this perfect, fashionable two-block cut. This is a brilliant psychological double bind. The bald top represents internal collapse, forced surrender, and the death of old useless habits. But those perfect sides? They show the dreamer's desperate need to maintain a refined social persona for the outside world. I mean, they are literally falling apart inside, but trying so hard to look perfectly put together on the outside. Let's pull this all together. Looking at the summary here proves that this chaotic nightmare wasn't just random anxiety. It was actually a masterclass from the subconscious. The airport is telling the dreamer to stop rushing and prepare carefully for their life transition. Trinity is reminding them to trust their inner resilience. And that weird two-block haircut? It's a direct order to let go of old pride, violently prune away past burdens, and start totally fresh. The mind is quite literally forcing a reboot. It is truly amazing how our minds work to protect and guide us, even when it feels like we're just being tortured by weird test anxiety. So the next time you wake up in a cold sweat from a completely nonsensical dream, take a moment. Ask yourself, what is my subconscious trying to prune away so I can finally move forward? What bizarre haircut do you actually need right now to finally let go of your waking burdens? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Catch you next time.